then we will come back in half an hour to the questions. I'm going to take myself to slideshow. There we go. And I mean, first up is my friend Aristotle. I mean, he's not my friend, obviously. His three words you've probably come across for different reasons, but they are good when we think about influencing an audience, whether that's in an interview, in a pitch, on a big stage like the Netflix gig. An audience are we're always selling to an audience. We're selling our ideas, we're selling the offer, we're selling ourselves in a brutal sense. And he says you need three things to persuade. You need ethos, your character, your values. And if your values tally with those of the audience, you're in the sweet spot. I don't know about you, I'm a big surveyor. And with that Netflix crowd, I had over indexed in the sense that I had talked to a lot of the regional sponsors. It was a global conference, so it was APAC, UCAN, LATAM, and EMEA all coming into Santa Monica. And I had talked to the regional sponsors of the four different regions. And I talked to the boss, and I'd had a really long chat to the organizer. So that by the time I got there, I had a sense of a Venn diagram of their values as a team, and oh my gosh, they're fast, aren't they? And my values and where we intersected. And that was the ethos that I brought on stage with me. It was Caroline, but it was filtered for that particular team who have a different tilt possibly to some of the teams that you're working with. Then pathos, emotion. I mean, in your industry, you know this one deeply. As speakers, when we're nervous and we go into fight or flight, what happens is that the brain figures you're going to punch them, run away, hide under the table, freeze, or charm your way out of here. You don't need emotion in your voice. So we've all seen the situation where someone is charming and charismatic in one moment, and then they walk out on the panel or they walk out on stage, and it's like they've suddenly gone flat because fight or flight wipes out emotion. So bringing pathos to these pitches, these panels, these interviews, these big speech moments needs to be a really conscious process. You got to work it. And then finally, he talks about logos. You've got ethos, your character, your values. You've got pathos, the emotion, and then you've got logos, the content. With the Netflix crowd, the risk was I could feel it that I was so deep in imposter syndrome that I tried to impress them. And trying to impress people is the wrong strategy because it's all about you. And instead, what was important, and we'll talk about how I got there, is that we think not about how do I impress them, but about how do I help. And when you get into that space of contribution, as the writer Ben Zander calls it, not competition, that's when you show up at your best. Like in a job interview, oh, I know they're talking to these three other people. Am I better than them? You know, maybe they're better at this. That's all irrelevant. You can't work that one out. The only thing you can work out is how you can contribute. Of course, there were probably other speakers who would do just a good job as me on that stage. Many. I mean, we're in a global working world now. But is there anybody on the planet who speaks to exactly the thing I speak to? Possibly, but not very many of them. And if you can really center into that thing that you bring, your vision, your ideas, then the nerves go because you're contributing in the only way you can in the short time you have on the planet. So keep Aristotle in mind. And now what we're going to do is really go into process for the next 20 or so minutes. I'm going to invite you to get your pen and paper and to really just take part in this using a particular context. It might be that interview, it might be that pitch, it might be that panel, it might be something completely different. It's a situation where David Bowie style, you are out of your depth. That's the most important thing. Because if you're not out of your depth, you don't need me. You're already masters at what you do. So make it something where you're feeling a bit out of your depth. And let's channel Bill Nye first up. When I first wrote my first book back in 2008, he was one of the first actors I interviewed for this book. And you may have worked with him. He's a lovely man. He's very dapper and he's very paranoid. And he said, whenever I get a movie job, I imagine that someone's going to walk me off set on the first day. Did anybody read Tom Hanks' novel? That actually happens in Tom Hanks's novel. The lead actor gets fired really early on in the shoot. Must be awful. And he said, I really, really worry about that. And so when I'm picked up by my driver in the morning, I sit in the car and I really just think about how can I help? Not just how can I help the director and the other actors, but how can I help the makeup team? How can I help the grip? How can I help the costume? How can I help the distributors? You know, how can I help the whole team that is going to get this movie out there? And he said that takes me out of this being the Bill Nye show and it puts me into something where I'm more at ease. And I think that framework is really, really important. So, 3 questions. First question, what is my intention for this interview, panel, pitch, etc.? I have a friend called Michael Parker who's now 83, but in his day, he used to run all the pitches for Saatchi and Saatchi. And he said that when Saatchi's pitched, the big question that they took into the pitch was what's the one thing they're going to say about us in the corridor? So it's like in Abdullah's example, what are they going to say to each other about Abdullah when they go and get a coffee after the interview? And it's got to be positive, of course. Our inner critic can do all the nasty stuff. I was definitely doing that for Netflix. But if I got myself under control, it would be, what are they going to say about Caroline's session? So let's take that first. What's my intention for this session? What's the one thing that they're going to say about me after this positively? One sentence. And you can put it in the chat if it's helpful, if it gives you a bit of accountability, or you might decide not to. It's up to you. If anybody's not sure, feel free to ask. Next question. This is the Logos one. What are they going to think intellectually about what I have to say? At Netflix, I wanted them to think that speaking in a global business is something you can improve with practice because that business has particular challenges about it's so global. So what's the thing they're going to think about this? What's the mindset shift perhaps you want to create? Then we get to the pathos question. This is really important. And when we're nervous, we don't think about it. What's the feeling you want to leave them with? That's another Maya Angelou, isn't it? They'll never forget what you make them feel. True, big time in telly, isn't it? What's the feeling? So with this Netflix crowd, I wanted them to have fun. They'd all flown across the world to see each other. I was first up after the boss, followed on by the big boss. I wanted to make them enjoy it, feel happy, have fun. What's the feeling you want in that situation? And a good rule is whatever you feel, they feel. So if I wanted them to have fun, I needed to be having fun because mirror neurons copy each other. So if I'm having fun out there, they will be too, as long as I've tailored it in the right way. And then the final question is, well, penultimate question, but in terms of think, feel, do, what's the action? This is the ethos one, really. What's the action they're going to take in the meeting or after the meeting that's going to tell you you're on the right track? In a pitch, perhaps they ask loads of questions. In an interview, perhaps they lean in, start writing stuff down. Maybe again, they ask you a load of challenging questions. With the Netflix crowd, I wanted loads of interaction, loads of hands up, people leaning in, people laughing, people coming up to me at the end. So, what's the do? You've got those three things. What do I want them to think? What do I want them to feel? The pathos. What do I want them to do? The ethos. And then that Saatchi's question, what are they going to say to each other after this? When this closes, what will they remember? What's the one thing they're going to remember? Anybody want to ask about any of those? They're super, super simple, but we don't do the simple stuff, and that's why we overcomplicate speaking. Feel free to unmute and just ask if there's anything you're not sure about. I'll give you about another minute to finish off.
Can I ask
Hello?
about the
Hi. Yeah.
hi hi. Can I ask about the first question and why that how that differentiates from the last one? Because the first one was about what are they going to think about me, and
Yeah.
then that last question, in terms of what are they going to say or talk about me?
The first
What?
one's a bit Stanislavski. Does anybody come across Stanislavski and the super objective? Depends how drama you are, really. So in drama, sorry about my dog. Can you hear my dog? She's on full voice, but my headphones may cut her out. In acting, if I'm playing Hamlet, my super objective is to avenge my father's death, right? That's the overarching intention. And then there are sub intentions or actions within scenes and within beats, as Stanislavski would call it. In a way, the intention is taking you through energetically the whole meeting. It's what sets you up at the start. So if I give you the difference in Netflix, my intention was for this to be fun and practical and useful. And the one thing at the end is more like a kind of tangible action. They might say, oh, okay, in that meeting with Sky, I'm going to make sure that I use my voice differently. So the intention gives you a super objective, an energetic quality, and the one thing is an action really that is produced by that super objective. Does that make sense? Do you want to parse that in terms of your own example? Would that help? Do you have a clear intention for the event?
No, I guess I was thinking about because you mentioned what is my intention at the beginning, but then you also mentioned what is the one thing that they're going to think about me, and then I meant that question. I think that was for logos, and then you then mentioned what are they going to be talking about me at the end.
So there's probably two one things in the sense that there's the one thing they say and there's the one thing that they do.
Mm,
And the
okay.
one thing they say is probably something happening in the meeting, but the one thing they do afterwards is, in a way, that's the test, isn't it? Because nice things happen in meetings and then nothing happens in the future.
Yeah.
They can say lovely words to you in the pitch and then you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
But the one thing that happens after is maybe it's I get a call the next day. Maybe it's that I get three questions, people come up to me. What's the absolutely concrete thing that is going to happen as a result of this meeting?
Mm,
Because if you're clear on what you would like to happen, there's a lovely quote from the ancient world which says, unless you know what harbor you're sailing to, no wind is the right wind.
that's good.
And these things can feel too big, can't they? I want to win this pitch. I want to get this exec job. I mean, that's big. But if it's just, I want them to call me tomorrow or I want them to ask for another meeting, that's much more, it's like eating a pizza in bite sized pieces rather than trying to stuff the whole thing into your mouth.
Yeah.
Does that help?
No, definitely. Because I think for me, the thing would be, avoiding them saying, "Oh, he's a nice guy. What a nice guy,"
Yeah,
and then not having that at the end that action of, okay, we want to work with him, we want to collaborate, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah,
I like that.
yeah,
That's
that's what
nuanced.
comes to
And
mind.
then in a moment we're going to step into their shoes. So thinking about what you would need to hear in order to make you think, let's call him. Let's have a meeting about this afternoon. Let's get him in again. What would you need to hear to make you called to action in that way? As the exec or as the production, whoever it is that you're talking to. Make sense? Any more questions? Because that was a goodie. It's so simple, but it's also there's some depth to this, if you can see.
Yeah, I've got a question,
Great.
um, and I was really interested at the way that you said that you had kind of like done your research, in terms of the audience. Is that something that I mean, I obviously look into the careers of the people that are going to be interviewing me.
Bit of LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You do a bit of that, and then you kind of sort of stalk them on kind of YouTube and stuff to see what they've done. But I
Precisely.
still, do you find that you need a little bit of a skill of being able to kind of read the room as well? Because kind of like, with the best intentions and being able to kind of like sell yourself, sometimes, like, do you feel like, you need an ability to kind of like kind of like kind of sort of have kind of have like an innate understanding of whether or not what you're saying is going down the way that you want it to go down? Because sometimes I leave an interview thinking that I've completely like completely kind of smashed it, and then I don't get the call. Do you know
It's
what I mean?
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I just wondered kind of what your thoughts were about that.
My really strong feeling is that we're all good at reading rooms with the coder when you're centered. If my mind is noisy and I'm off center, then I don't read rooms well. But if I've had, an actor's half, the idea that an actor takes, some of you might have acted. Has anybody done a drama training or worked in theatre? It's the 35 minutes before a show goes up. I would say if you've got a job interview, get there 30 minutes early, sit in a cafe, turn off your phone, turn off WhatsApp, turn off email, don't watch anything on screen. Just sit quietly and think about what does this person need from me. Meditate, do some breathing, something that gets you really centered, because then when you walk into that room, you will be present to what is actually happening, not what you think should be happening or what you'd imagine might happen or what you wish was happening, but what is happening. And that's when we ace it. One of the things I did before Netflix when I wasn't freaking out was meditate. I woke, because you know what it's like in LA, you wake up super, super early. So I woke up at 4 in the morning and did 2 hours of meditation. And that, when I walked out on stage, I was calm. I was so calm. And I noticed them and it was nice. So I would say it's what you don't do, Abdullah, before those meetings that matters. Quiet time. Actually, that wasn't Abdullah's question, was it? Was that yeah, I
Yeah,
can't is
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
it was.
it
Yeah, it
was
was.
perfect. I
Yeah, it was
suddenly
good.
doubted myself.
That's very interesting, actually. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for that.
Pleasure. This tool I love. I used it for my TED talk. I have flexed it on every big talk I've ever done, and I think it's great for pitches. Take your pen and take a clean sheet of paper and think about, first up, the problem space that you are being invited in to help with. So, for example, with this Netflix crowd, the problem space is a global business. I mean, how many languages? I think at least 100 languages in this team, and a very, very fast culture. And that means that people get very nervous, they get imposter syndrome, they sometimes don't meet the standards that they want to because they get taken off center. So then, if that's the problem space that I am as a speaker and being asked to help with, what do I believe to support this audience? In my example, I believe that when you understand how breath works, you can center yourself in no matter how high the stakes. I believe, which not all people in my trade believe, that everybody has a great speaker within. Because I've been the bad speaker, in inverted commas, who learned to be better. I believe that we each have a style to find which is different to those around us. And when we find our own style, that's when we shine. So you can see I can go on with this. One of those beliefs is going to be the driver for what you say. And it's, you know, in Perjet's example, you as an exec will be different to other people they will be interviewing. So what is it that you believe about execing that makes you different? Like what, you know, if we think about Anne Menser, what is it about her that makes her different and successful? She's not like other execs, is she? She has her own qualities. So let's think about for each of your examples, what is it that you believe? And let's write down 3 to 5 beliefs. Now, just ask if you're not sure how to apply this to the context. In a job interview, it might be, what do you believe is important in this role? And what do you believe are the personal qualities that will allow you to ace it? In a pitch, it's what do you believe about your project? In a panel, to Fatu's example, it's what do you believe the audience need to know? Did anybody hear Kamala Harris talk about public speaking recently? It's a clip that went viral about the Titanic. Didn't we hear that? She was asked by a group of school kids, they said, what's the secret to great public speaking? And she said, imagine you're on the Titanic and you know the ship is sinking. You got to tell people to, get to action, get to the lifeboats. Probably not the best example because there weren't enough, were there? But, that was what she gave. And it's the how can I help piece. It's you have got something here that you believe that can help this audience. What is the belief that you need to surface that's going to change their lives? Change this business. Let's write down those beliefs. And again, if you want to put them into the chat, go for it. Beliefs are the engine of good speaking, the engine of energy. They bring our pathos alive. I don't know enough about your industry, but I imagine that belief is the hallmark of great directors and great producers. It drives a vision, a unique point of view. If anybody's not sure, just unmute and ask. I think Aristotle, I might be misquoting him, but he talks in ancient Greek, obviously, about infecting others with enthusiasm. It's quite nice. You infect them with your enthusiasm. Paget, you've unmuted.
Oh, no, I don't think I have.
No, no.
Was I just going to put my... Oh, sorry. Ellie. Sorry, Ellie.
I was just going to say the infecting thing with the enthusiasm. That's before I pitch anything, I always think about the energy that I want them to reflect.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And what kind of energy? Give us an example because that's great.
I'm always just very smiley, very up, very like, hi, da, da, da. You know what I mean? Because I think if you go in soft and, people just disengage. So I just try and go in with as high energy as possible so that you kind of immediately, they feel like they have to match it and then reflect it back to you and your idea.
Love it. Yeah. And you can take, like a good piece of TV, you can take them through a sequence of emotions, the excitement and fear and curiosity and jeopardy And the beauty about the voice is that if I feel it in my breath, my voice will carry it.
Yeah.
So tuning into what's the series of emotions that this audience needs to feel is a really great thought. Yeah, and Peggy,
Never thought about it about other emotions, but that's so true actually. Like you have to take them on a bit of a journey.
Like any good telly or film, isn't it? It's the same. What's the arc? What's the arc? And I think what we forget is that our voices take people on an arc. And actually, with the Netflix gig, one of the guys in marketing came up at the end and said, I really liked how you took us on a journey. There were moments where you were still, and there were moments where you were energized. And I think, like a good piece of telly, that keeps them awake as well.
Yeah.
I'm loving Slow Horses at the moment. I'm very late to the party, but I'm loving it. Good. Yeah. Peggy, compassionate, a sense of investing in each other, loyalty, those are great feelings. A sense of we, a friend of mine in sales calls this parity, showing up as an equal. When I work with political candidates, it's imagining that you've already got the job, not in language terms, because that would be arrogance, but in body language terms, walk into that room as if you're already part of the team. It's imaginative because it takes away the angst and the needing. It's like it takes away the feeling of a bad date and makes it more of a great chat. So what if I was already part of this team? What would be different? And I think because I talked to the Netflix crowd so much before I got there, I knew enough. I mean, I don't have the pace to work in that business permanently, but I knew enough to feel like I was part of their team for 5 days.
Do you have any more examples of how to do that without coming across arrogant?
I mean, I think that Bill Nye example of how can I help? Well, actually, what we're going to do now, can I come back to that question in a moment? We're going to step into their shoes. And that is the ultimate. You do it psychologically, but I bet you haven't done this physiologically. So can we test the next tool and then come back to that question? Is that okay?
Of course.
Anybody got questions about I believe before we move on? It's very Martin Luther King. Was certainly the secret to his success. By the way, did you see Obama's speechwriter has just written a book? He's great. Terry Shuplatt. It's well worth a look. It's literally just come out in the last couple of days. Let us go on because both of those men have learnt from, the tradition of great oratory in terms of vocal persuasion. And Terry Shuplatt has, as the speechwriter, learnt a lot about that from President Obama. I call him Obama like I know him, which is a bit disrespectful. Good. So these questions, always I come back to as a speaker. We've thought about what's their pain. We've thought about how can you help. The absolute golden nugget is what is my transforming insight here? When I created my TED Talk, it's that the voice is an instrument. You can learn how to play it. You can learn quickly how to be better at it. So my question to you is, if there were one transforming insight that you would want to share with this audience, there's a lovely quote from a filmmaker whose name you will have to forgive me, I've forgotten. He says, make visible what without you would not have been seen. Make visible the thing that without you would never be seen. What can you, as one human on this huge planet, make visible that would never be seen without you? That's your transforming insight. And that's why someone, I mean, for a director, that's why you get hired, isn't it? But for all of us, that's why someone wants to hear from us. Does anybody want to, it feels like a very live example in your industry. Does anybody want to ask about it or speak to it? It's my big assistant when I'm creating talks. What's the one thing I want them to remember? What's the transforming insight that's going to change how they see this? Because don't speak if it's not going to change what they think. Don't bother speaking. Saha, I see you thinking very deeply. Do you want to ask anything or share anything?
I just can't pick a scenario in my head because there are so many scenarios that I just can't fall into.
Let's go back to the moment where your breath failed you, where you that's the wrong way, where you felt a sense of losing your breath.
Okay.
What in that situation, what was the audience's pain, do you think? How did they need you? What were they worried about?
It wasn't an interview scenario, so I don't know if they're, I mean, they just needed me to answer their question clearly and to the
Let's
point.
pause. So if you're hiring, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
But as the interviewee, you might not think about that problem. What was the problem that meant they needed to hire you? What were they missing in that team?
The volume of projects, and they didn't have enough people to cover it. Yeah.
That's the pain that's really important. We'll get you to step into that. How could Sahar, if we step back and see the movie in a distance, help them with that volume?
My background is quite diverse. So
Sahar, yeah.
I've worked in different parts of the industry. So that would bring more value to their team and the projects, because I would have the ability to see it from different angles.
Love it. That's a goodie. And then you might want to dig into this in time. The next question then is, what's the transforming insight that Sahar can bring to this? What's the one thing you have learned in those different roles that you can bring to this team? And that's what gets you hired. That clarity of how you can help.
That diversity, I think.
Perfect. So then you start to dig into what are the stories that bring that to life, that transforming insight.
Yeah.
And for me, I knew that they could have, I don't know, at least 10 other speakers in the world who would do equally as good a job, possibly a better job than me. But what does Caroline bring that only she on the planet could bring to that audience? That's where the confidence is. Because then you're in a room of one, right? There's only you. And it's because I wasn't any good at it. It's because I'm an introvert. It's because I'm a bit awkward. That's what I bring. So the transforming insight has so much power when you really dig into it. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
So sorry, can I just be clear on this one then? If for example we're pitching a documentary series to Netflix, would their pain be Netflix's pain, or is it the audience in the terms of what our content can answer?
There's two levels, aren't there? And when we step into their shoes, you probably think about those two levels.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, what's every exec scared of?
A flop of a show.
Yes, having to report that back to base,
Yeah.
not much fun. So I think they nest together, don't they? But I think you're right in that you probably want to separate them out first.
Cool.
But it's a good question. Should we step into the shoes? How long have we got? I'm going to give us 5 minutes for this exercise, stepping into their shoes, and then we'll come to questions, which will give us, 20 minutes towards the end, if that's okay. So there I was, back in my hotel room. Okay, Big Boss is coming on stage after me. That means he's sitting at the back while I'm doing the end of my talk. I also had met the CMO at the beginning, and I knew that she was sitting there watching me. So I had at least 3 C-suite members of Netflix at the back of this auditorium watching me, this ballroom. And I was in my hotel room the night before, and my imposter syndrome was off the charts. You know, where you just think, actually, if I just get a flight back, they wouldn't miss me. So what I did was I sat deeply in the shoes of the audience who I had spoken to, who really needed my help, because that is a tough business to work in. And some of you probably have worked with them. It is fast, it is uncompromising, and you only make a mistake once. And I knew that I had something to help them with in terms of their speaking. And so I stepped into the shoes of someone in the audience. I did an exercise called meta positioning. I had a nice hotel room. They do look after you, but still. The way it works is this. Position 1, we've just done. You know your own intention, think, feel, do. You've thought about the pain of the audience. If you thought about how you can help, you've got your transforming insight. Now we are going to step into their shoes. We are going to be them. This is where you get to be, you know, Bill Nye or brilliant Gary Oldman. He's so good in Slow Horses, isn't he? I don't know if you haven't watched it, watched it. We're going to get to be the actor, and you're going to choose someone in that meeting. So in Cherry's example, you might be one of the really sporty experts in that production. Okay. In Abdullah's example, you're the interviewers. I don't know how many they are, but you're going to choose the person who you most want to influence. Okay. If it's a pitch, it's whoever's across the table. And that is position 2. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. I'm going to invite you to stand up for a moment. This is a bit silly, but just go with it. It does make a difference. If everybody stands up for a moment, you're going to sit down really fast. You're going to slightly move your chair across the room. And when you sit down, you are going to be someone in that audience. You're not you anymore. You are now in character as them. And the questions I ask you, you're going to answer as I, person who works in Netflix marketing team, for example, in my example. Or if you're Cherry, I, very sporty expert on this production team. Okay, so have a seat as someone in the room that you want to influence. You are now going to take on their job. You're really stepping into their shoes. Okay. Think about what this person is wearing as you sit down. Think about what they had for breakfast. Think about what matters to them. And I want you right now to think about what are these person's work goals? What are they being rewarded for here? You can call it KPIs, you can call it targets, you can call it goals. What, as this person, are you being rewarded for? What's important to you here? What's your focus? Maybe we'll go to Cherry. Yeah, what's the sporty type? What's important to this person in that? If that's okay to share, you might say no, that's okay too.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine to share. I think their focus is having their voice heard, impressing the MDs for sure. Maybe a bit of competition with me in terms of the reality side potentially and the story side.
So that Cherry over there. So there might be a focus. That feels like it could still be a bit Cherry's. I hear this. How would this person frame it? I want to.
At the start, I would say, if I'm honest, undermine maybe slightly.
Is that conscious or unconscious? Are they consciously going, I want to undermine? I mean, it does happen. I'm not denying it.
I'm still trying to figure that bit out with the person that I've got in mind. It's the first time we've worked together. So yeah, they're very passionate, they're very intelligent, they're clearly very knowledgeable on sport.
Let's say this as I
yeah.
want to. What do you want in this reality show?
I
What
want
do you
to
want?
be the best member of the team on this production. I
That
want my
feels
work to be the most important in this production. I want my decisions to be the ones that we go ahead with. I want to impress my authority on the team. I want to have the best relationships with the MDs and the head execs.
got it. That feels different. Yeah.
I want to lead the pitches in the Netflix meetings.
That feels different. Can you hear the subtle difference between and that's where the useful information is. That really just sitting into their shoes. I want to be the best. Yeah, we can work with that. I want to undermine. That's a whole different can of worms there. Which in it is not. I'm not saying it's not true. There are certainly people we've all worked with them whose goal is to undermine, but usually there's a more ethical motivation at the front of their mind. I want to win. I want to be the best. I want to impress my mum, whatever it is. Good. So that was my focus here. Next question. Who or what am I trying to satisfy? Which is subtly different to what's my focus. I mean, in Netflix, it's back to base. It's LA, it's Los Gatos, it's who or what am I trying to satisfy here? Is it Variety? Is it the Wall Street Journal? Is it the analysts? A lot of these big businesses are, now like HSBC, aren't they? They're just reporting to the markets. That's a huge pressure. Who or what are you trying to satisfy? You say the wrong thing on the exec of one of those big businesses and the share price drops 10%. I mean, that must be that waking up to that must be quite a bad feeling, don't you think? And it's different to the take that you have coming in, but it might be the reason you get the job if you help them with that. Next question. What's keeping you awake at night? Because whenever there's any difficult behavior, you can pretty much guarantee that there's some fear driving it. So what, as this person, keeps you awake at night? What's worrying you? What's it like having this job? I mean, some of those jobs, it's quite a lot to keep you awake at night, isn't there? Success can keep you awake at night if you're worried you can't replicate it. If you can't keep it going, that's terrifying. Next question. How can the person who joined this VC today, so that Abdullah, for example, that Cherry, how can this person on the VC today help you as the person who you've stepped into the shoes of? So I just got a bit of an echo there. So in my example, because it's making it clear is important here, there's Caroline who's worrying about this Netflix speech, and then there's the person in the marketing team whose shoes she stepped into. If I'm being that marketing person, how can Caroline help me with my difficult meetings? What is it that I need from Caroline here? Or in Cherry's example, if you're the sporty expert in this production team, what would make me want to work with Cherry? Support each other, collaborate. Or in Abdullah's example, if I'm the interviewer, what would make me want another meeting with Abdullah? Or to walk down the corridor and have a chat with someone as soon as I've spoken to him? We need to get him back in. What would make me do that? How can they help? And if you're not sure about that, feel free to unmute because it's a funny one. It's like it's a kind of bit meta. It's called meta positioning, this exercise for a reason.
Yeah, I'm not completely clear on that one. I also, sorry, I got back really late from a flight last night, so my brain's not working quite at my usual speed.
Do not worry. Remind me of the context of the meeting and remind me who you're wanting to influence.
So for the things that I've got in mind are two pitches that are coming up, both of which are to Netflix. One, so yeah, in
Let's
mind,
choose
I
one. Let's
basically
choose one.
I stepped into the commissioner.
Great.
That's who I
So
am.
so the question is, how can you help this commissioner with their problems? What is it that you can bring that is going to take one worry off their plate, that's going to make them feel like they can relax into allowing you to make the best work of your life.
And is that in relation to me as an expert in my field and how I would deliver said thing, or is that about how is this project is specifically going to help them?
I think, again, there are two levels, aren't there? It's trusting that you are absolutely the right person to ace this.
Yeah.
And then thinking about what, as a commissioner, that's going to do for me when I go into my meetings and report back on the success of this project.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think what we're coming up with here is that there are often two levels. There's the creative and what you can bring and your vision and your energy. And then there's the kind of meta level of how is this going to make this business money a success? Barzy, talked about viral, whatever. Those two levels, I think you need to meet in those meetings. So probably you're stepping into both sets of shoes. Make sense? Anybody else got questions? If it's a bit uncomfortable to get into, that's often quite a good sign, this one. Whenever anybody in coaching makes me feel uncomfortable, I'm always like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but it's good, because it often shows us where our gaps are. Final piece of the jigsaw before we go back to Q&A is I'm going to invite you to stand up again. And I'm going to invite you to have a real bird's eye view on this. You can take a walk as far, Tara's all right. She's in her garden. She can go a fairly long way if she's got headphones on. You're going to step back from this meeting, literally a step back, and you're going to see the you that joined this VC. You're going to see the person that you're influencing, and you're going to give yourself a real perspective, a real bird's eye view on this situation. Send that drone out as far as you can, right? Really far away. What advice from a distance do you want to give that you there? I really recommend that you stand up and go as far across the room as your home office will allow, or garden. What advice do you want to give that you there about handling this situation? In that hotel room, I said to myself, Caroline, you've thought loads about this. You've done loads of prep. You know what you're going to say. Slow down, trust yourself, have fun. That was the advice I gave myself. You become your own coach. What advice do you want to give yourself? And give it as you, Caroline, you, Abdullah, you. And when you've got that advice, come back and put it in the chat. You've got this. It's often what we need to hear. And notice what happens to your state. If anybody's read the book Chatter, he talks a lot about how it's important to talk to ourselves as you, because it makes us feel more like our own coach. Yeah, make sure you have a good night's sleep before. Good advice. Keep it coming. Sometimes it's the simplest thing on the surface that makes the biggest difference. Slow down was something I said to myself. Enjoy the process. That's gorgeous. That step back slows our heart rate. It centers us. It grounds us. Yeah, these are great. Hired for a reason. You've got a great opportunity. I like that. Yeah, everything happens for a reason. You've got the skills. Believe in your source. I love just getting started. Remember what you did to get here. Gorgeous. We forget all of that stuff. You've all already had incredible careers. And sometimes it's like we erase it. We delete it when we get into those big rooms. Bring it in with you. Take it in with you. So there I was. Oh, the triangle on the screen. Yeah. Can we come back to that, Shanshan, in a moment? I'm going to sum up and we'll come back to it. Is that okay? And I might talk it through now as well. So there I was. I'd been totally freaked by the fact that the boss was going to be on stage after me. I was in my hotel room. I was feeling imposter syndrome. I gave myself the advice, Caroline, just slow down, have fun, get grounded. I rehearsed it once more that night. And then in the morning, I did such a lovely meditation. I went for a walk on the beach. I came back. I got into my gear. I had my hair done. And when I got into that ballroom, I just really sat quietly, had nice chats with people. The big boss did her intro. I felt the applause. I heard the applause. I walked out on stage and it was like floating. I was so relaxed because I'd done the prep. I trusted myself. And I really enjoyed it. They were a lovely audience. And I went back to the table at the back and sat down at the end. And the organizer came up to me and she said, "Don't tell anyone, but I think you're the best speaker I've ever heard. But she said, don't tell this lot." And it was such a nice feeling because I had had so much doubt. I mean, I've never had imposter syndrome like it. It was almost paralyzing the day before. And I I don't think it's changed anything apart from the fact that I know that under pressure, as long as I step into their shoes, which we're going to talk about Shan Shan in a moment, as long as I'm really intentional, as long as I have a really, really clear sense of transforming insight, how I can help, that if I slow down, take my time and connect, I can do it. And so I want to offer this as a process, and we'll come back to some questions in a moment. First up, really think about what's my intention. What do I want them to think, to feel, and to do? What's the one thing they're going to say after this? Really think about your transforming insight. I think the thing you can make visible that no one else on the planet will make visible quite like you, because of all the experiences you've had in your life, because of what you bring as a human. Then step into their shoes. So Shan Shan, just to sum up for you, position 1 is intention, think, feel, do, transforming insight. How can I help? It's your perspective. It's the Shan Shan perspective. Position 2 is the stakeholder perspective. Can I ask who you chose? Is that okay? Yeah, who did you choose as your stakeholder?
Sorry, are you talking to me?
Yes. Who did you choose in your situation?
Execs that I am going to pitch 2 stories to.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So that is one of those execs. You do them each separately because they probably each bring their own thing and their own pressures and their own goals. And then the third position is when I asked you to stand up and step back, see it from a distance. And that's giving yourself the piece of advice. You've all given yourself such lovely advice here. Remember what you did to get here. You've got this. Everything happens for a reason. It does. And we don't take it personally. Just getting started, believe in your source. I love that one. So that we always, when we step back from it and give ourselves a bit of space, that real classic bird's eye view, know the answers. So I really believe that third position is where you need to get to when you're in the waiting room. How does this look from a distance? What do I need to take into that room with me? What's the advice I want to give myself? Does that make sense as those 3 positions? And then you can see that then you walk back to position 1 with all of the advice having done this. Does anybody else want to ask a question about that? If not, I'm going to come back to your questions and your situations. Does anybody I'm thinking about interviews. Does this help everybody who's thinking about interviews? Really step into the interviewer's shoes. How can you help? What do they need? Do your research. You already know loads of people who know them. You may already know them. I think Perjit's dropped off. Cherry, does this help you with your reality show?
Yeah, it's helped massively. Thank you so much. It's been brilliant, really helpful.
Your not knowing about sport perspective is, I would say, incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
So own it.
Thank you.
And be happy to ask the really stupid question, knowing that a lot of your audience are going to be thinking exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I also just add as well, just to Cherry, is that person, it's almost like you don't need to compete with them because you have these qualities that that person, an experience doesn't have. So actually their information about sport, like, yes, you need that, but you don't really need to learn it all. Like, they have that to help you, and they're on your team. So you've got those kind of human interest, personal qualities, and that is so valuable. So it's almost like, as long as you can keep up with the call sheets and the kind of the terminology, and as you say, like, don't be shy to say, I don't know what that means. It's like, it doesn't matter. You've got your strong role, and all of that stuff, it's just too much, and you don't need it all in there. As long as it's kind of like at your fingertips, you can ask people. I think it's fine.
I
I
love
agree.
it.
I also
Yeah.
just wanted to add, Cherry, as well. Like, I think you need that partnership, and you might even be able to just kind of like own that narrative a little bit more and kind of like feed that message back to them just in the way that you speak about, aren't we such a brilliant partnership because we bring these two things. If we want to make a broad program that everyone's going to come to, and not just the sports purists, but actually, you know what I mean? Then you really need that balance and almost kind of make them think that they had the thought. And you know what I mean, without threatening them, but also saying we are equals and we need both of us here.
I
Definitely.
love that. Have you come across Chris Voss's book? Chris Voss is a negotiation expert who talks a lot about letting others have your way. I think
I read
Chris,
the Power book, but it's maybe similar kind of.
similar tilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Cherry, can you see that you've got a lot of support here? So Seb, Sammy, Michelle, I think you want to be talking to after this offline. I think that there's loads of wisdom in this
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
virtual room.
great, Michelle. Thank you.
Can I
I am
just
conscious. Yes, go for it.
sorry, Caroline. I'm happy to chat later, Cherry. But just as a headline to give you, I was hired by Channel 4 in the lead up to the London 2012 Paralympics. I was asked to come up with an idea for a series in the lead up to the Paralympics. And I think you've got the wrong person, because I've never worked on a sports show before. I work in factual, I do fact ent, do documentaries, and they said, no, you're the right person. We'd love you to come and chat to us. And I went to chat to them. They knew all about sport and Paralympic sport. I knew nothing about Paralympic sport, but I knew how to conceive an idea for a series that would sit at 7 o'clock on Channel 4. And so we partnered up that way, and actually it was a really good success in the lead up for the Paralympics. So it's possible that not possible, it's definite that you are bringing something to that party that somebody else doesn't have, and you have in spades. But we can have a chat afterwards.
Thanks, Michelle. That'd be great.
Remind them of who you are, Cherry. Come on now.
I will.
Notice the brilliant advice you're giving each other, and ask yourself, do I give myself that advice in those moments? Because that is where we can really start to back ourselves.
Sorry, I have a question. It's a good time to ask a question. So
It is. Got 3 minutes. Yep.
Okay, give
Yeah,
a
some
speech.
people are just sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving a speech to an audience, would they ask you a question? Because in interviews, or when you pitch a story, the exec will ask follow-up questions. Sometimes it's very difficult, and I don't have an answer, and I don't think anybody has the answer. We need to find out through this film, for example. I think I mentioned in the chat, like, one story is there's no data. I think that is a problem itself. When you do not have an answer, or they ask a very, very tricky question, what's your strategy in that kind of situation?
It's being comfortable with ambiguity, isn't it? Increasingly, I think the skill of our time is being centered within ambiguity. Because does anybody in your industry have the answers right now? I didn't get the sense that anybody at Netflix has the answers right now, even Big Boss, without sharing any secrets.
Yeah, and then I wonder, who am I to, because one of the intention that I wrote down before the class, I said, is to give them recognition, the production company recognition, and probably more income for them. But who am I to actually? I'm just wondering. Because when you make more money, you'll pay me more. But I was wondering that's the goal for everyone probably. So what's my position to pitch a story that nobody actually want to take the risk to take those stories? Yeah.
What's your transforming? What do you see that no one else sees? What's the transforming insight?
I think, for example, one of the stories I'm pitching is about ESEA, that's East Asian, Southeast Asian community. And then we have the Heritage Month, which is the third year. And when I talk to everybody about ESEA, nobody knows what that is.
Bingo. That's futurology,
yeah.
isn't it? The thing that isn't being talked about, that's the thing. Can you imagine when they pitched any of the big shows that people probably went, what? That's trust your vision. Trust it. Be excited about it.
Can I also add, for that question, if you ask a question on the spot, is there also that sense of being able to be transparent about it? Because there's some people that are actually just like really reflective thinkers, as in like, yeah, you might get a question, but then you're quite reflective. You might need time to sort of like chew on it a little bit. Is it better to just be a bit open and just say, oh, you know what, I don't know right now, or maybe there's a more a better way of communicating that?
I'm all about the meta state. What I mean by that is that if you say I don't know and your breath is shallow and your voice is shaky and you seem uncentered in that, it will make them nervous. If you say, let me think about that, great question, doesn't have to be those words, and your system is steady and you're centered and you're reflective, it's fine. It's about what your nervous system is up to as much about what you say, because what they're looking for is that you can be centered in ambiguity, like a pilot in turbulence, because we're all in turbulence right now. Telly's in turbulence, publishers in turbulence, every tech's in turbulence. So how can you center yourself through that shift? That's what they're looking for. And have you got the vision to take us somewhere interesting?
Caroline, can I ask a quick question?
Certainly can.
More about when you're doing public speaking, and I've watched your TED talk and I've watched a couple of other things you've done, and you're brilliant at it, apart from those pauses and all the rest of it. But when you're giving a public talk to a big group of people, and we talked, very early on about how to remember certain things with mind. Is there a sort of a mini blueprint for how best to do that in terms of a beginning, middle, and an end? Or because I can see you have different techniques. You talk a lot about different people and you use sayings, and that's maybe your thing. It wouldn't necessarily be my thing. But is there a blueprint for a sort of beginning, middle, and an end, or something similar?
Find Your Voices, the book I wrote in 2020, and that has a chapter called Speak Up and Stand Out. And in that chapter, I give you my blueprint, my process. And it's very much the process that we've worked through today, which is, what's the intention here? How can I help? What's their pain? What's the audience's problem? Because you're there to solve a problem. What's my transforming insight to solve that problem? Stepping into their shoes, beginner's mind, what do I need in what order as the audience? How do I need to close to sum up? So you could say that we have walked through the process, but if you look at that Speak Up, Stand Out chapter and Find Your Voice, it talks you through it in more detail. And as you say, we all have our own way into this. Everybody does it slightly differently. Depends on what your background is, what your thing is.
And the emotional journey you spoke about as well, that could be another thing to think about when you're writing your pitch or your speech or your whatever.
So much. I mean, if I'm mind mapping, I'm very conscious of time, we should drop off soon. If I'm mind mapping, I map the emotional arc around it. So first I want curiosity, then I want some jeopardy, then I want some excitement, now I want some curiosity again. I want to leave them on a high. What is the arc, and what are the stories that are going to help that? But we haven't talked stories today because that is not something you need, I don't think. Does that help, Michelle?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I've been scribbling away throughout.
So The next time you hit that David Bowie, whoa, I'm swimming out of my depth. My feet don't touch the ground anymore. In fact, I don't know where the bottom is in this lake stroke sea. Embrace it, back yourself, step into the audience's shoes and think, how can I help? How can I contribute? With that, I'm going to hand back to Simone, who I know was thinking all about contribution yesterday. It's been
Definitely.
such a fun session. You're a gorgeous group. I love how you back each other. I think that's a really rich resource. I'm here if you need me. Just email or link in and ask questions. And if anybody wants audio resources, just message me on LinkedIn and say, Caroline, can I have the audio courses? And we'll send them. Okay.
Wonderful. Caroline, thank you so much yet again for coming back and talking to our leaders. Like I said, I really welcome you as part of our community, and kind of the expertise that you share is invaluable. And please reach out. We'll invite you to join our online platform, and please do feel free to. And also, it's really helpful, and I love it. Share with us any speeches that you're doing or panels or anything that's coming up and how they've gone. And if you've used some of Caroline's techniques, how that's improved. I was telling Caroline, I think I told you guys earlier, that I used that when I was doing my opening speech for the festival on Monday. I spent Sunday listening to podcast, the session that we did, the previous session, and her TED Talk, and it was amazing. It really made me feel confident. I was in flow. God knows what it sounded like, but I was definitely in flow. And I got the points that I really wanted to nail and get across. So Caroline, thank you. You're absolutely gorgeous. Thank you for spending and sharing time. Thank you, you guys, for being here. As always, we are, if you haven't checked out our online festival, please do. There's lots of amazing stuff going on.